Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The wind howled across the barren, frozen plains of Ice Crystal Star, the eternal cold of the planet biting through the thickest of layers. Everything here was painted in shades of white and blue, where frost covered every inch of the land and ice stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Towering spires of ice reached up toward the darkened sky, glittering under the faint glow of the distant sun. The people of Ice Crystal Star thrived in this harsh environment, using their ancient and powerful magic to control the ice and snow that enveloped their world. It was their way of life, and none commanded more respect or fear than their queen, Elsa. She stood alone in her grand palace, built from solid ice and frost, its translucent walls casting shimmering light in every direction. The intricate carvings on the walls depicted stories of their historia, stories of survival and mastery over the frozen elements. Elsa, the Ice Queen, had ruled over this kingdom for centuries, her unmatched power woven into every snowfall, every gust of icy wind. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, contrasting with the pale blue gown that flowed behind her. Her piercing eyes, the color of ice under the sun, betrayed little emotion. But inside, Elsa was restless. The cold, which had once been her ally, now felt like a cage. Her magic, so deeply tied to the frozen landscape, had always been a source of pride, but now it left her feeling isolated. In the vastness of Ice Crystal Star, she was alone. She had heard whispers of other worlds, worlds where warmth existed, where the sun bathed the land in golden light, where emotions like love and joy could blossom without the fear of being shattered by the cold. Elsa's mind had been occupied by thoughts of Earth, a planet unlike any other. She had never seen it, but the old records in the royal archives spoke of it, a world of warmth, where people experienced emotions in ways her people could never understand. To feel warmth, not just physically but emotionally, was an alien concept to her. Here, on Ice Crystal Star, logic and survival were paramount. Emotion was a weakness, or so she had been taught. That night, standing in front of a grand window in her palace, Elsa made her decision. She could no longer ignore the pull of Earth, the desire to experience something beyond the cold. With a deep breath, she raised her hands, feeling the familiar rush of power as ice formed in the air around her. She would leave Ice Crystal Star, just for a while, and experience the world of warmth for herself. The decision felt right, even if it meant leaving her duties as queen behind for a time. The next morning, Elsa was gone. Earth greeted Elsa with a stark contrast to her frozen homeland. She arrived in a bustling ski resort nestled in the snow-covered mountains of Switzerland. It was winter here, the only time of year Elsa felt she could blend in, but the snow on Earth was different, softer, less oppressive. The air, though cold by Earth standards, felt warm compared to the biting frost of Ice Crystal Star. For the first time, she breathed in air that didn't sting her lungs. She had taken on a new identity, disguising herself as a ski instructor named Elsa to avoid any suspicion. Humans had no knowledge of Ice Crystal Star or its magic, and she intended to keep it that way. Dressed in human winter gear, her silver hair now tied back in a braid, she fit in with the other ski instructors at the resort, though there was an otherworldly grace to her movements that didn't go unnoticed. On her first day, she met Ryan. Ryan was everything Elsa wasn't. His smile was warm, his eyes full of life, and he carried an easy confidence in everything he did. He was one of the best skiers at the resort, effortlessly carving down the steepest slopes with a natural athleticism that left others in awe. Elsa watched him from a distance at first, intrigued by his connection to the snow. Unlike her, Ryan didn't command the elements, so he moved with them, becoming one with the mountain and the wind. It wasn't long before their paths crossed. During a break between lessons, Ryan approached her, his smile disarming. "You must be new around here." "I'm Ryan," he introduced himself, extending a gloved hand. Elsa hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking his hand, feeling the warmth even through their gloves. "Elsa," she replied simply, her voice carrying the faintest trace of her homeworld's icy tone. "Nice to meet you, Elsa. I've seen you on the slope as the You're pretty good," Ryan said, his tone casual but sincere. She nodded, unsure of how to respond to the compliment. Skiing came naturally to Hera. It was just another way to manipulate the snow and ice beneath her feet. But there was something about Ryan's enthusiasm that was infectious. He was so alive, and it was a stark contrast to the frozen, emotionless existence she had known on Ice Crystal Star. As the days went by, Elsa found herself drawn to Ryan. They began skiing together, and through these shared experiences, she slowly opened up to him. Ryan, with his endless energy and positive outlook on life, was fascinated by Elsa's mysterious aura. She was quiet, reserved, but there was a grace to her that he couldn't quite place. She moved with a fluidity that he had never seen before, almost as if the snow itself was part of her. One afternoon, after a long day on the slopes, Ryan and Elsa sat in the lodge by the fire. The heat of the flames was foreign to Elsa, but she found herself enjoying it. Ryan noticed her staring into the fire, a look of deep contemplation on her face. "Not used to the warmth, huh?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. Elsa glanced at him, her icy blue eyes reflecting the flames. "No," she admitted softly. "It's different." Ryan chuckled. "Well, you'll get used to it. There's more to life than just the cold, you know." Elsa remained silent, but his words struck a chord with her. More to life than the cold. Could that really be true? On Ice Crystal Star, cold was life. But here, in this small lodge on Earth, with the fire crackling and Ryan's warmth beside her, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could learn to embrace something more. Their bond deepened with each passing day. Ryan taught Elsa about Earth's simple pleasures, the warmth of a cup of hot cocoa after a long day in the snow, the beauty of a sunset over the mountains, the laughter shared between friends. These were things Elsa had never experienced before. She had never allowed herself to. And yet, with Ryan, she found herself wanting to embrace them. But Elsa's true nature could not stay hidden forever. It was during one of their more challenging ski expeditions when the truth about Elsa began to surface. The weather had turned, and a sudden blizzard swept across the mountain. The visibility was near zero, and the winds howled like the spirits of Ice Crystal Star. Ryan, confident in his abilities, had insisted on continuing their run despite the worsening conditions. But the storm was too much, even for him. Elsa skied ahead, her instincts alert to the dangers of the mountain. She could feel the snow shifting beneath them, the telltale signs of an impending avalanche. Without thinking, she turned back toward Ryan, her heart pounding in her chest. She was too far ahead, and he was struggling to keep up. "Ryan!" she called, her voice lost in the wind. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. The slope crumbled, and in an instant, Ryan was caught in the avalanche. Elsa's eyes widened in horror as she watched the snow swallow him whole, his body tumbling down the mountain, disappearing beneath the white. Panic surged through Elsa's veins, but it wasn't panic born from fear, it was panic born from emotion, something she had rarely felt. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. In that moment, Elsa made a choice. Raising her hands, she summoned the magic within her, feeling the cold power surge through her veins. Ice and snow responded to her will as she stretched her power out across the mountain. The winds ceased, the snow calmed, and in an instant, Elsa's magic froze the avalanche in place. The mountain became eerily still, the world around them frozen in time. With a wave of her hand, she parted the snow, revealing Ryan's unconscious form buried beneath the surface. She rushed to his side, kneeling in the snow, her heart racing. Ryan's face was pale, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. "Ryan!" she whispered, her voice trembling as she placed her hands over his chest. Elsa placed her hands on Ryan's chest, her fingers trembling as she let the cold seep from her body into his, stabilizing his condition. The magic surged through her hands, controlled and precise, focusing on keeping him alive, easing his pain, and drawing the warmth back into him. His body stirred beneath her touch, and she could feel his pulse growing stronger, his breaths becoming more regular. The relief that washed over Elsa was overwhelming. She had never felt this way about anyone before, had never been so terrified of losing someone. In the vast, frozen expanse of her home, emotion was something she had never allowed herself to feel deeply. But here, in this moment, watching Ryan's chest rise and fall beneath her fingertips, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the sun. It was a warmth that came from within her, something new and unfamiliar, and yet, she couldn't deny it. Ryan groaned softly, his eyes fluttering open. Confusion crossed his face as he tried to sit up, but Elsa gently pressed him back down. "Take it easy," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "You were caught in an avalanche." He blinked, dazed, his eyes searching hers for answers. I thought I was done for," he murmured, his breath visible in the cold air. "How?" Elsa hesitated, the truth pressing at the edge of her lips. She had saved him with her magic, had frozen the very avalanche that threatened to take his life. But how could she explain that to him? How could she tell him she wasn't like the others, that she wasn't from this world? Ryan's gaze sharpened, as if sensing her hesitation. He glanced at the mountain, the frozen cascade of snow behind them, then back at Elsa. "That wasn't a normal avalanche," he said quietly. It stopped. Just like that. And you were there." There was no escaping it now. The truth hung between them like a delicate thread, waiting to be pulled. I'm not who you think I am," Elsa finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not from here." Ryan frowned, confusion deepening in his eyes. "What do you mean? Not from here? From the resort?" She shook her head, steeling herself. This was Ida, the moment she had dreaded. But she owed him the truth, after everything that had happened. "I'm from another world," she admitted, the words falling from her lips like snowflakes. "A world of ice and snow. I came to Earth to escape the cold. To feel something different, something warmer." Ryan stared at her, his mouth slightly open as if trying to process her words. "Another world? You mean like an alien?" She couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at her lips. "In a way, yes." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Elsa waited, her heart pounding in her chest, wondering if this was the moment when everything would fall apart, when he would pull away from her in fear or disbelief. But then, slowly, Ryan's face softened, and he reached up to touch her hand, his fingers curling gently around hers. "You saved me," he said simply, his voice filled with gratitude and wonder. "I don't care where you're from, you saved my life." Elsa. Relief washed over her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Elsa allowed herself to breathe. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding back, how much she had feared being rejected for who she truly was. But Ryan wasn't pulling away. He was still here, still with her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan smiled, his thumb brushing over her hand. "I should be the one thanking you," he said, his tone light but sincere. "I don't know how you did it, but I'm glad you did." For a long time, they sat there in the snow, the wind quiet now, the mountain calm. Elsa could feel the weight of her secret lifting from her shoulders, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was hiding. Ryan knew the truth, and he hadn't turned away. It was more than she could have hoped for. But deep down, Elsa knew this peace wouldn't last. Her magic had saved Ryan, but it had also exposed her. The guardians of Ice Crystal Star would know where she was now. They would come for her, and when they did, she would have to make a choice: either stay on Earth with Ryan, or return to her home and the duties that awaited her. The thought lingered in the back of her mind as they made their way down the mountain together, Ryan leaning on her for support as they reached the base. The resort staff rushed to help him, and he was quickly whisked away to be checked by the medics. Elsa stood off to the side, watching as they attended to him, her mind racing with 100 different thoughts. What would happen when the guardians came? How would she explain her choice to them? And most of all, what would she do if they tried to take her back by force? That night, after Ryan had been cleared by the doctors and they were finally alone in the warmth of the lodge, Elsa sat by the fire, her mind still heavy with worry. Ryan sat beside her, his hand resting on hers, but he could sense her unease. "You're thinking about what happens next," he said softly, his voice gentle. Elsa nodded, staring into the flames. "They'll come for me," she whispered. "The guardians of my world. They'll try to take me back." Ryan's grip on her hand tightened. "We'll figure it out," he said, determination in his voice. "You don't have to go if you don't want to." But it wasn't that simple. Elsa knew the laws of Ice Crystal Star. She was their queen, their ruler. Her duty was to her people, to her world. She couldn't just abandon them. "I have responsibilities," she said quietly. "I can't just stay here. No matter how much I want to." Ryan was silent for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hit her like a gust of wind, sharp and piercing. What did she want? She had come to Earth to escape the cold, to experience something new, something warmer, and she had found that in Ryan. But could she really leave her world behind? Could she abandon the people who depended on her? "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I want to stay here with you, but I don't know if I can." Ryan's face softened, and he reached up to touch her cheek, his fingers warm against her cold skin. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I'll be here. I'll stand by you." Tears pricked at the corners of Elsa's eyes, and she leaned into his touch, her heart aching with the weight of her decision. She didn't want to leave. She didn't want to go back to the cold, to the isolation of Ice Crystal Star. But the pull of duty was strong, and she knew the guardians wouldn't give up easily. As if on cue, there was a sudden gust of wind outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching in the snow. Elsa's heart skipped a beat, and she pulled away from Ryan, her senses on high alert. "They're here," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Ryan stood up, his expression hardening. "Then we'll face them together." Elsa didn't have time to protest before the door to the lodge burst open, and 3 figures stepped inside. The guardians of Ice Crystal Star were tall, their bodies wrapped in shimmering cloaks of ice and snow, their eyes glowing with a cold, blue light. They were ancient, powerful, and utterly unwavering in their purpose. Elsa, the leader of the group, spoke, his voice like the wind itself. "You must return. Your place is on Ice Crystal Star. Your people need you." Elsa stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not ready to go back," she said, her voice firm but laced with uncertainty. The guardian's eyes narrowed, his gaze flicking to Ryan. "You have become entangled with this world," he said coldly. "It weakens you, distracts you from your true purpose." Ryan stepped forward, his jaw set. "She's not going anywhere if she doesn't want to." The guardians ignored him, their focus entirely on Elsa. "You are the queen," the leader said, his voice sharp. "You belong to Ice Crystal Star." Elsa's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her mind racing. She couldn't let them take her back. Not now. Not when she had finally found something more, something warmer. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, her voice rising with defiance. "I'm not just a queen. I'm more than that." The guardians remained unmoved, their expressions as cold as the ice they commanded. "You must choose, Elsa," the leader said, his voice like a knife. "Return with us, or face the consequences of your defiance." The weight of the decision pressed down on Elsa like the very snow she had once controlled. She looked at Ryan, his eyes filled with unwavering support, and then back at the guardians. Her choice was clear. "I'm staying," she said, her voice steady, her resolve unshakable. The guardians' expressions darkened, but before they could respond, Elsa raised her hands, her magic swirling around her. Ice and snow erupted from her fingertips, forming a barrier between her and the guardians. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice echoing with power. The guardians hesitated, their eyes narrowing. They had not expected such defiance, such strength. But Elsa was no longer just the Queen of Ice Crystal Star. She had found something more, something that made her stronger than ever. Ryan stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, and together, they faced the guardians. For the first time in her life, Elsa felt truly free.